Have you ever wondered what lurks in Pennsylvania's smallest towns? Tonight, we're uncovering 10 disturbing true stories that will make you question every shadow. From stalkers in abandoned mills to predators hiding beneath rivers, these encounters happen to real people in real places. Names and locations have been changed to protect those involved, but these accounts are completely real. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. I'm Unspoken Fears, and your nightmares start now. Don't forget to subscribe. My name is Kabir, and I need to tell you about something that happened to me in December 2024. Something that still makes me check my rearview mirror every single day. I'm not the paranoid type, never have been. But what I discovered in that abandoned paper mill outside Sport changed everything. I thought I knew about safety, about privacy, about how well someone can watch you without you ever knowing. I was 26 at the time, living in a cramped apartment in Sport, Pennsylvania, one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone, and opportunities are scarce. The population barely hits 2,400 people, and good jobs are even rarer. So when I saw the posting for overnight maintenance and security at the old Riverside paper mill on the edge of town, I jumped on it. The mill had been shut down for about 5 years, slowly rotting away while the owner tried to sell it. My job was simple: walk through the building twice a night, make sure no one broke in, check for leaks or structural damage, and file a report each morning. The pay was decent, and the work seemed easy enough. Night shift didn't bother me. I've always been more of a night owl anyway. My girlfriend Honey thought it was creepy from the start. She'd driven past that mill her whole life, watching it decay into the skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows. But I needed the money. We both did. She was working double shifts at the diner on Main Street, and we were trying to save up to get out of Sport, maybe move somewhere with actual opportunities. This job felt like a blessing. The first 2 nights were uneventful, almost boring. I'd show up at 10 p.m., unlock the main entrance with the keys they'd given me, and do my rounds with a flashlight and clipboard. The place was massive. 4 floors of empty production space, offices stripped of furniture, and a basement level that used to house the boilers and mechanical systems. It smelled like mold and rust, and every footstep echoed through the empty halls. But nothing happened. No squatters, no animals, nothing. Just me and the silence. Then came the 3rd night, December 18th. A winter storm had rolled through Sport that evening, dumping about 8 inches of snow by the time I arrived at the mill. The temperature had dropped to around 15 degrees, and the wind was brutal, cutting through my jacket like it wasn't even there. I parked my truck in the usual spot near the loading dock and trudged through the fresh snow to the entrance. That's when I saw them, boot prints in the snow, leading straight to the side door of the mill. Fresh prints, maybe an hour old at most, barely dusted over with new snow. What made my stomach drop was that they only went in. There were no prints coming back out. Someone was inside. I should have called the police right then, but honestly, I thought it was probably just some homeless person looking for shelter from the storm. Sport didn't have many resources for people like that, and I knew the basement level still had some residual heat from the old pipes. I decided to check it out myself first, maybe just tell whoever it was to leave before I had to get authorities involved. I unlocked the main door and stepped inside, shaking snow off my boots. The mill was dark except for the pale moonlight filtering through broken windows. I clicked on my flashlight and followed the wet boot prints across the concrete floor. They were clear as day. Someone had walked in with snow on their boots and left a trail. The prints led toward the stairwell that descended to the basement. My heart was pounding as I followed them down. The basement was the creepiest part of the mill, a maze of old machinery, boiler rooms, and storage areas that hadn't been touched in years. The prints led me through the main corridor and stopped at a door to one of the old boiler rooms. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, flashlight raised. What I found made my blood run cold. Someone had been living there. In the corner of the room was a sleeping bag, relatively new. not some ratty old thing a homeless person would have. Next to it were supplies, canned food, bottled water, a camping stove, even a battery-powered lantern. But that wasn't the worst part. Covering the walls were photographs, dozens of them, Polaroids, all pinned up in neat rows, and every single one was of me. There I was walking out of my apartment building. There I was at the grocery store on Maple Street, loading bags into my truck. There I was at Honey's apartment, standing on her porch. There I was at the gas station at the hardware store, at the diner where Honey worked. Some of the photos were taken from across the street, some from much closer, close enough that whoever took them could have reached out and touched me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my flashlight. But what do you do when someone has literally been documenting your entire life without you knowing? The photos went back weeks, maybe even months, based on what I was wearing in some of them. I recognized a jacket I'd worn back in October. Then I saw the journal. It was sitting on top of a plastic crate next to the sleeping bag, a black notebook with a pen clipped to it. I picked it up and opened it, and what I read made me want to vomit. It was all about me, my schedule, my habits, my routines, written in neat, careful handwriting. Leaves apartment at 7:15 a.m. every weekday. Gets coffee at the Sunoco on Route 6 every Monday and Friday. Girlfriend works late shift on Thursdays. He stays at her place Wednesday nights. Always leaves back door unlocked when taking trash out. The last entry was dated that very night, and it just said, he starts work at the mill tonight finally. That's when I understood this wasn't random. This whole job, someone had engineered this. They'd gotten me hired at this isolated location so they could, what? I didn't want to think about it. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Directly above me, on the ground floor. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving toward the basement stairs. Panic hit me like a freight train. I looked around the room frantically. There was only one door in or out, and whoever was up there was heading straight for it. I was trapped. Then I remembered the coal chute. These old mills used to have chutes where they'd dump coal down to the basement boilers. If it wasn't sealed off, I might be able to get out. I shoved the journal in my jacket pocket and ran to the back corner of the boiler room. Sure enough, there was the old coal chute. A metal slide leading up at an angle to an exterior hatch. I could see a faint outline of light around the edges. It wasn't sealed. The footsteps were on the basement stairs now, coming down, coming closer. I heard them reach the bottom, heard them start down the corridor toward the boiler room. I climbed into that chute and pushed upward, using my back and legs to brace myself against the metal walls. It was barely wide enough for my body, and the metal was ice cold through my clothes, but I didn't care. I squirmed up that chute like my life depended on it, because maybe it did. I heard the boiler room door creak open below me, heard someone step inside. I froze, barely breathing, pressed into that chute about halfway up. I couldn't see who it was, couldn't hear them speak. Just silence, waiting. Then the lights went out. Someone had cut the power to my flashlight, which I dropped in my panic. The basement went completely dark. And in that darkness, I heard breathing, heavy, excited breathing, and then a voice, calm and quiet. I knew you'd come looking. I didn't wait. I shoved myself up through that chute with everything I had, bursting through the exterior hatch into the freezing night air. Snow hit my face. I scrambled out onto the ground beside the mill, ran to my truck, fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I looked back at the mill and saw a figure standing in one of the basement windows, just standing there, watching me. I couldn't make out any features, just a silhouette, backlit by moonlight. I started my truck and got out of there, tires spinning in the snow. I drove straight to the police station, still shaking, still feeling like I was going to throw myself. I showed them the journal, told them everything. They went to the mill immediately with a full unit. They found the room, found the photos, found all the supplies. But whoever had been there was gone. The police dusted for prints, interviewed me for hours, Tried to track down who had actually hired me for the job. The company that supposedly owned the mill claimed they'd never authorized any security position. The email address and phone number I'd used to apply were dead ends, untraceable. They never found who it was, and the case went cold after about 2 months. No leads, no suspects, nothing. The detective told me it was probably someone who'd become obsessed with me for some reason. Someone with enough technical knowledge to fake a job posting and enough patience to stalk me for months without me noticing. I couldn't stay in Cootersport after that, neither could Honey. We packed up and moved 2 counties away, to a bigger town where we could disappear into the crowd a little better. I changed jobs, changed my routines, changed everything. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. About 3 months after we moved, I was coming home from work, and I saw it. A blue sedan parked across from our new apartment building. The same blue sedan from one of those Polaroids. I'd memorized them all while waiting at the police station that night, and this car had been in the background of at least 5 of the photos. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the car was gone. They said I was probably mistaken. The trauma can make you see things that aren't there. Maybe they're right. But I don't think so. Because last week, Honey and I were at a new grocery store in our new town, somewhere we'd never been before, and while we were in the checkout line, I saw someone watching us from the end of the aisle. They turned away before I could get a good look, but I felt it. That same feeling I must have missed for months back in Cootersport. The feeling of being watched, of being studied. I still have that journal. I keep it as evidence, as proof that I'm not crazy. And sometimes I flip through it and read those entries about my life, and I wonder, how long was this person watching me before they started writing it down? How long before that? And the question that terrifies me most, are they still watching now? Because if someone can engineer an entire job just to get you isolated, just to get you where they want you, what else can they do? How far will they go? I don't know the answer, and I'm terrified to find out. All I know is that I check my mirrors constantly now. I vary my routes. I never follow the same schedule twice. I installed cameras around our apartment. I keep my doors locked, always. But deep down, I know the truth. If someone wants to watch you badly enough, if they're patient enough, careful enough, there's almost nothing you can do to stop them. And that's the most horrifying thing of all. My name is Sarahi, and what I'm about to tell you will make you think twice before turning on your camera, before going live, before trusting that the people watching you through a screen can't reach you in real life. I learned the hard way that in a small town like Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, there's no such thing as anonymous viewers. And sometimes the person watching you online is also watching you through your bedroom window. I was 19 in the summer of 2024, living with my parents in Wellsboro while attending community college online. Wellsboro is tiny. Population barely hits 3,200, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and nothing exciting ever happens. That's probably why I started streaming on Twitch in the first place. I needed something more than just this small town life. I wanted to connect with people beyond the same faces I'd seen since kindergarten. I'd been streaming for about 1.5 years, mostly just chatting streams and occasionally playing games. Nothing huge. I had maybe 300 regular followers. My setup was simple. Webcam on my desk, mic, decent lighting, and my bedroom in my parents' house as the backdrop. I streamed 3 or 4 times a week, usually in the evenings after my online classes were done. It was fun. It felt like I had this whole other life online where I could be myself without the judgment of small-town gossip. The weird messages started in late June 2024, right around the time Wellsboro was gearing up for its summer festival week. At first, I didn't think much of it. I got the occasional creepy comment, every female streamer does, but these were different. They came through super chats, which meant someone was actually paying money to make sure I saw their messages. The first one came from an account called Wellsboro Watcher 87, and it said, "Love the stream tonight. Bet your parents' blue sedan is running better after that tune-up last week. My dad had just gotten his car serviced. It was blue. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was someone from town who recognized me. Wellsboro is small enough that everyone notices everything. I laughed it off on stream, made some joke about small-town life, and moved on. But the messages didn't stop. Over the next 2 weeks, they kept coming, always from different throwaway accounts, always with details that made my skin crawl. Your mom's lasagna looked amazing tonight. That yellow sundress is really pretty on you. You should wear it more often. Interesting choice, painting your room that shade of sage green. The thing is, I never showed what I was wearing off camera. I never talked about what my mom cooked, and I just repainted my bedroom walls, but hadn't mentioned it on the stream. Someone who could see into my actual life was watching me. Someone who knew things they shouldn't know. Then came the message that made my blood run cold. It was a Thursday night in mid-July. I was about an hour into my stream, and a super chat popped up from an account called Your Neighbor 503. It said, "I can see you right now. Your curtains are open." I froze. My bedroom window faced the backyard, and beyond that was a stretch of woods that separated our property from the neighbors. My curtains were open. I always kept them open during the day because I like the natural light, and I usually forgot to close them before streaming at night. My webcam only showed me from the shoulders up, and the wall behind me, nothing else. But if someone was outside, they could see my whole room. They could see me. I tried to keep my composure on stream. Didn't want to freak out my viewers. I made an excuse about needing to grab some water and got up. My hands were shaking as I walked to my window and looked out. The sun had set about an hour ago, and the backyard was mostly dark. Just the glow from our porch light reaching the edge of the grass, before everything disappeared into shadow where the woods began. At first, I didn't see anything, just trees and darkness. Then I saw it. A faint glow, like a phone screen, in the tree line about 50 feet from my window. As I stared, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, the glow moved, shifted, like someone was adjusting their position. Someone was out there, in the woods, with their phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed my phone and opened my Twitch app, went to my own stream to check the chat. And there it was, a new message from another throwaway account. "She sees me now. Looks scared. This is the best stream yet." Whoever was out there was watching me through my window and watching my stream simultaneously. They were live streaming my reaction to discovering them. I felt like I was going to be sick. I didn't go back to my computer. I ran downstairs to my parents, told them someone was watching the house. My dad grabbed a flashlight and went outside to check. But by the time he got to the woods, whoever had been there was gone. We called the police, and they came out, took a report, searched the woods with flashlights, but found nothing. No footprints, no evidence, nothing. The officer told me it was probably just some kid from town messing with me, that I should close my curtains and maybe take a break from streaming for a while. He didn't seem to take it seriously, and I guess I couldn't blame him. It did sound kind of paranoid when I said it out loud. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew this was real. I ended my stream that night without explanation, just closed everything down and locked my bedroom door. I didn't sleep at all. Every sound from outside made me jump. I thought about quitting streaming entirely, but it was the one thing I had that felt like mine, the one escape from the monotony of Wellsboro. So I made changes instead. I closed my curtains. I repositioned my setup, so even less of my room was visible. I stopped talking about my personal life, my family, anything specific about where I lived. I thought I was being careful. For about 2 weeks, the messages stopped. I started to relax, thinking maybe whoever it was had gotten bored and moved on. I even started to believe the police officer. Maybe it had just been some kid messing around. Then came August 3rd, a Tuesday afternoon. I was streaming earlier than usual because I didn't have classes that day. It was around 3 p.m., and I was just chatting with viewers, talking about nothing important. My little brother had baseball practice and wasn't home yet. My mom was at work. My dad was in his workshop in the garage. A super chat came through, $20, which was more than I usually got. The account name was something generic like StreamFan2024, and the message said, "Your little brother just got home from baseball practice. He's got dirt all over his uniform." My brother was 12, and his practice didn't end until 3:30. He shouldn't be home yet, but the message said, "Just got home." Present tense, like it was happening right now. In a small town like Wellsboro, anonymity is supposed to be impossible, so how was someone watching my house in real time without me knowing who they were? I didn't even think. I just bolted from my chair, left my stream running, and ran downstairs. My brother's backpack was by the front door. He was home early. I heard his voice from the entryway. He was talking to someone. I rounded the corner and saw him standing at our open front door, still in his dirty baseball uniform, talking to a man I didn't recognize. The man was maybe in his 30s, wearing jeans and a hoodie despite it being summer, holding his phone in one hand. When he saw me, his eyes went wide, like he was surprised, or maybe excited. My brother turned and said, "Hey, Sarahi, this guy says he's a fan of yours. He wanted to meet you." Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I grabbed my brother's arm and pulled him back from the door. "Get inside now," I said, my voice shaking. The man took a step forward, still holding his phone, still staring at me with this weird intensity. "I've been watching you for months," he said, his voice casual, like this was a normal conversation. "You're even prettier in person." I slammed the door in his face and locked it, my hands trembling so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. My brother was confused, asking what was wrong, why I was so scared. Through the door's window, I watched the man stand there for a moment. Then he turned and ran, just took off down our street toward where a car was parked, a few houses down. I called 911, gave them a description, told them everything. They sent officers out immediately this time, and my dad came rushing in from the garage. The police found the car, abandoned about 2 miles away. It had been reported stolen that morning. They found the man's phone in the front seat, and what they discovered on it made me never want to stream again. He'd been following me for 7 months, taking photos of my house, my family, documenting our routines. He had screen recordings of dozens of my streams. He'd figured out through tiny background details and comments I'd made, where I lived, what school I went to, everything. He'd created dozens of throwaway accounts to send those super chats, each one registered with fake information through VPNs that made him untraceable. But they never found him. The phone had no fingerprints, wiped clean. The stolen car was a dead end. They put out a description, but no one in Wellsboro recognized him. He wasn't from town. The detective said he probably was someone who'd found my stream randomly, became obsessed, and tracked me down using information I'd accidentally revealed over months of streaming. I quit streaming that day, deleted my channel, deleted all my social media. My family installed security cameras around the house, motion sensors, new locks on every door and window. My dad even cut back some of the trees between our house and the woods so there'd be less cover for anyone watching. For 3 months, nothing happened. I started to feel safe again, started to think maybe he'd moved on, maybe found some other streamer to obsess over. I'd cut my hair shorter, changed my routine, tried to become invisible in my own town. Then in early November, I got a notification on my phone. Someone had sent a super chat to my old Twitch channel. Even though the channel was deleted, the notification still came through to my email. The message said, "I'm still watching. You look good with shorter hair." I'd cut my hair that morning, just a few hours earlier. No one outside my family had seen it yet. I hadn't left the house, hadn't posted anything online. But somehow he knew. That's when I realized the truth. He was still in Wellsboro, still watching my house, still tracking my every move. In a town of 3,200 people, where everyone supposedly knows everyone, a stranger had made himself invisible while watching me every single day. We reported it to police. They increased patrols in our neighborhood, but what can they really do? They can't guard us 24/7. They can't watch every person who walks down our street. The detective told me he's probably moved on by now, that the message was likely pre-scheduled to scare me. But I know better. I know because sometimes, when I'm walking to my car, I feel eyes on me. I know because sometimes I see the same unfamiliar vehicle parked on our street. Different cars, different colors, but always someone sitting in the driver's seat looking at their phone. I know because my parents installed those cameras, and sometimes when we review the footage, there are hours where it looks like nothing's happening. But if you watch carefully, you can see shadows moving in the woods, just beyond where the camera's night vision reaches. I don't stream anymore. I barely go online at all. I'm planning to transfer to a college far away from Wellsboro, somewhere big enough that I can disappear into the crowd. But the thought that haunts me every single night is this: in a small town where anonymity should be impossible, how did someone watch me for 7 months without anyone noticing? How did he get close enough to know my brother's baseball schedule, to see what I was wearing, to watch me through my window, all without a single person in this town recognizing him or finding it strange? And the answer that terrifies me most is that maybe he wasn't a stranger at all. Maybe he was hiding in plain sight the whole time. Someone I'd seen 100 times without really seeing. Someone who knew that in a small town, the best way to be invisible is to look like you belong. Because who pays attention to just another face in a crowd of 3,200 players? I still get notifications sometimes, messages to old accounts I can't fully delete, and they always say the same thing: still watching. My name is Jire, and I need to tell you about the house I inherited in Eckley, Pennsylvania, about the sounds that came from beneath it, and about the debt that coal towns like this one can never fully repay. What happened to me in the spring of 2024 made me understand that some places hold on to their past so tightly that the past starts reaching back. Eckley isn't really a town anymore. It's more like a ghost one. The population has been declining for decades, ever since the coal mines shut down in the 1960s. Now it's mostly a museum village, a preserved relic of Pennsylvania's anthracite coal mining history, with maybe a dozen actual residents still living in the old company houses scattered along the main street. My grandfather was one of them, living in the same house his father had lived in, the same house miners had lived in since 1890. When my grandfather passed away in February 2024, I inherited that house. I was 28, working a dead-end job in Hazleton, living in a cramped apartment and barely scraping by. The inheritance felt like a gift, a chance to own something, to have a place that was mine. My parents warned me against it, said the house was too old, too isolated, that Eckley was dying and I should just sell it. But I didn't listen. I moved in during the first week of March 2024. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a 130-year-old mining patch town home. Small, drafty, with uneven floors and walls that creaked when the wind blew. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a kitchen and living room on the main floor, and a basement that my grandfather had used for storage. The basement was the worst part. Low ceiling, dirt floor in some places, concrete in others, with exposed stone foundation walls that wept moisture. It smelled like earth and rust and something else, something deeper and older. The first 2 weeks were fine. I was busy cleaning, fixing little things, trying to make the place livable. Eckley was eerily quiet, especially at night. No traffic sounds, no neighbors making noise, just silence broken occasionally by the wind moving through the abandoned buildings and stripped mine pits that surrounded the village. Then on March 19th, I heard the knocking for the first time. It was 11:47 p.m. I remember checking my phone because the sound woke me up. 3 knocks, deliberate and evenly spaced, coming from somewhere inside the walls of my bedroom. Knock, 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 then silence. I sat up in bed, listening, thinking maybe it was the old pipes or the house settling. Old houses make noise. Everyone knows that. But then it came again. The same pattern, 3 knocks, from a different spot in the wall. This time it sounded like it was coming from the wall that faced the stairs, going down to the main floor. I got up and checked the house, looked in every room, checked the basement, found nothing. No animals. No obvious source for the sound. I went back to bed, convinced myself it was just the house adjusting to the temperature change as the night got colder. But it happened again the next night, at exactly 11:47 p.m. 3 knocks, same pattern, this time from the wall of the living room. And the night after that from the kitchen. Always 3 knocks, always at 11:47, always moving to a different location. By the end of the first week, I was barely sleeping. The knocking was getting louder, more insistent, and it had started to sound like it was coming from below, from the basement, or even deeper. I called a contractor to check for structural issues, thinking maybe there was something wrong with the foundation. He came out, looked around, and told me the house was old but sound. He couldn't explain the knocking. On March 28th, I couldn't take it anymore. The knocking had become so loud that it echoed through the entire house, and it had spread to multiple locations, like whatever was making the sound was moving beneath the floor. I grabbed a sledgehammer and went down to the basement. I was going to tear open the wall where the sound seemed strongest and find out what was causing it. The wall came apart easier than I expected, the old plaster crumbling under the hammer blows. Behind it was stone, the original foundation, but there was a gap, a space about 2 feet wide between the inner wall and the outer stone. And in that space, I could see darkness, an opening leading down. I grabbed a flashlight and looked closer. There was a tunnel, hand-hewn into the rock and earth, shored up with rotting wooden beams that looked like they'd been there for over a century. The tunnel led down at an angle, disappearing into blackness beyond where my flashlight could reach. It was an old mining tunnel, running directly beneath my house. Pennsylvania's coal country is riddled with these tunnels, thousands of miles of them, most abandoned and forgotten, maps lost or destroyed decades ago. I knew Eckley had been built on top of mining operations, but I didn't know there were tunnels this close to the surface, this close to the houses. I didn't go into the tunnel. I'm not stupid, but I did explore the basement more carefully and found something else. A metal box hidden in a corner behind some of my grandfather's old tools. Inside was a journal, my grandfather's handwriting, entries dating back to the 1970s. Most of it was mundane, notes about house repairs, weather observations, but then I found entries from 1973 and 1974 that made my skin crawl. He wrote about the knocking, the same 3-knock pattern I'd been hearing. He wrote about hearing voices from the basement, men calling for help in the darkness, and he wrote about the night shift that never clocked out. There was a newspaper clipping tucked into the journal, yellowed and brittle, dated August 15th, 1973. The headline read, 11 miners presumed dead in Eckley tunnel collapse. The article described how a section of abandoned tunnel beneath the town had collapsed during maintenance work, trapping 11 men underground. Recovery. Efforts were abandoned after 3 days when additional collapses made it too dangerous. The mining company sealed the tunnel entrance and declared the men lost. My grandfather had written in the margins of the article, "They're still down there. They knock every night at 11:47. That's when the collapse happened. They've been knocking for help for 50 years, and no one's coming." What happens when people die calling for help in the darkness, and that call is never answered? I sat in that basement, holding my grandfather's journal, and felt the weight of it. 11 men buried alive, sealed in the earth beneath this town, forgotten by everyone except the few people who still heard them knocking. The knocking wasn't pipes or settling, it was them. It had always been them. That night at 11:47 p.m. the knocking came again, but this time it was different. It was louder, more frantic, and it was coming from multiple locations at once, from the walls, from the floor, from beneath the house. It sounded like dozens of hands pounding on the other side of thin barriers, desperate to break through. I went down to the basement. I don't know why. Maybe because I felt like I owed them something, like ignoring them was wrong. The knocking was deafening down there, echoing off the stone walls, coming from every direction. And then I saw the floor, the concrete section where my grandfather had poured a new foundation years ago. It had cracked, a fissure about a hand-width wide, running from the wall where I'd found the tunnel all the way to the center of the basement. I knelt down and shined my flashlight into the crack. It went deep, deeper than it should have, down into darkness where I could see the edges of older stone and timber, the remains of the original mine works. And as I watched, the crack widened slightly, like something below was pushing up, trying to break through. That's when I heard the voices. They came from the darkness below, men's voices, rough and desperate, speaking in old coal mining slang that my grandfather had taught me when I was a kid. "Help us up top," one voice called. "We're trapped down here," another said. The timbers collapsed. A third voice, younger, almost sobbing. "Please, we can't breathe." They sounded close, like they were right below me, just a few feet of earth and rock separating us. The voices overlapped. 11 different men, all calling out at once, begging for help. And I realized with horror that they thought I could save them. They thought I'd finally come to dig them out. But they'd been dead for 51 years. This wasn't a rescue. This was something else. Something that happened when tragedy gets buried instead of honored. When people die and nobody remembers. Nobody marks the place. Nobody says their names. I backed away from the crack, my heart pounding, and ran upstairs. I grabbed my phone and called the Eckley Historical Society, woke up the director at midnight, and told her everything. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "Your grandfather called us about this in the 70s. We checked the records. There really were 11 miners lost in that collapse. The company did seal the tunnel without recovering the bodies. It was common practice back then, cheaper than a proper recovery operation." She told me the names, 11 men who'd been working maintenance in an abandoned tunnel section trying to shore up areas that might collapse under the houses. The tunnel gave way, burying them instantly. The company paid some compensation to the families and moved on. That's how it worked in the coal towns. Workers were replaceable. Their lives were a cost of doing business. I asked her what I should do. She said there was nothing to do. The tunnels were too unstable to excavate, too dangerous to enter. The men would stay where they fell, just like they'd been for half a century. She said my grandfather had learned to live with the knocking, that eventually I would too. But I couldn't. I lasted 3 more days in that house, 3 more nights of hearing them knock, hearing them call for help, knowing they were right below me and there was nothing I could do. On April 2nd, I packed my things and left. I sealed the basement door, locked up the house, and drove away. I couldn't sell it. Who would buy a house built on top of a mass grave? I couldn't demolish it. That felt like another betrayal, erasing the last marker of where those men died. So it sits empty. I still own it. I still pay the property taxes. But I'll never go back. The thing is, the knocking didn't stop. The Historical Society director calls me sometimes, tells me that new people have moved into Eckley, curious about the museum town, looking for cheap housing. Some of them rent houses near mine, and after a few weeks they start complaining about sounds at night, knocking from beneath their homes, voices in their basements. She said it's spreading, like whatever is down there is trying harder to be heard, knocking on more doors, calling out to more people. Last month, she told me that a family had moved into the house next to mine, and within 2 weeks they'd broken through their basement floor trying to find the source of the knocking. They found the same thing I did, tunnels running beneath their home, and they heard the same voices calling for help. They left within days. She asked me if I'd be willing to talk to researchers, people who study coal mining history, about what happened. I said yes, because someone needs to remember those 11 men. Someone needs to say their names, even if we can't bring them up. Their names were written in my grandfather's journal, copied from that newspaper article. And I've memorized them. 11 men who went down into the earth one morning in 1973 and never came back up. They have families somewhere, descendants who might not even know what happened, who might not know that their grandfather or great-grandfather is still down there. sealed in the dark, knocking to be remembered. I think about them every night at 11:47 p.m. I think about how they died calling for help, and how that call echoes through 50 years and through layers of earth and stone, how it finds its way into the houses built above their graves, how it wakes people up in the middle of the night with 3 deliberate knocks the signal miners use when they need help. Eckley is dying. The population shrinks every year. Soon there might not be anyone left to hear the knocking. And then what happens? Do they just fade away, forgotten completely? Or do they knock louder, harder, breaking through the barriers between the past and present until someone finally answers? I don't know, but I know this. Coal built Pennsylvania. It fueled America's Industrial Revolution. It created wealth and power and progress. And the cost of that was paid in lives like those 11 men, people who went into the earth to dig out its riches and sometimes never came back. Eckley is just one town, one collapse, 11 men among thousands who died in those tunnels. And the debt is still unpaid, the knocking is still happening, and nobody's coming to help. My name is Matthew, and I need to tell you about something I discovered in the Loyalsock State Forest near Hillsgrove, Pennsylvania, something that changed the way I think about wilderness, about safety, about the places we go to escape from being watched. I'm a wildlife photographer. I spend most of my time alone in the woods with my camera, and I've always believed that nature was the one place where you could truly be free, truly be alone, but I was wrong. October 2024 was peak hunting season in Pennsylvania, and I'd driven up to Sullivan County to photograph elk in the state forest surrounding Hillsgrove. Hillsgrove is barely a town, population maybe 300 people, just a handful of houses clustered along Route 87 with the Loyalsock State Forest stretching out in every direction for over 114,000 acres of mountains, streams, and endless trees. It's remote, it's beautiful, and it's exactly the kind of place where you can hike for hours without seeing another person. I'd been camping in a dispersed site about 3 miles off High Knob Road for 2 days, getting some incredible shots of elk during the early morning hours when they're most active. On the 3rd day, October 17th, I was working my way along a game trail about a mile from my camp, looking for good vantage points, when I saw something that didn't belong. It was a trail camera, the kind hunters use to monitor deer movement, zip-tied to a tree trunk about 6 feet off the ground. Nothing unusual about that during hunting season, except this camera wasn't pointed at a deer trail or a mineral lick. It was pointed directly at the hiking trail, the main path that campers and hikers used to access this part of the forest. Something about it felt wrong. I've seen hundreds of trail cameras over the years, and they're always positioned to catch wildlife, not people. I looked around to make sure I was alone. Then I unzipped the camera from the tree and checked the SD card. What I found made my stomach turn. Hundreds of photos, maybe close to 1,000, and every single one was of people. Hikers walking past, backpackers setting up camp, couples holding hands on the trail, solo hikers with their faces clearly visible in the frame. The photos were time-stamped, dated back over several months, some from spring 2024, some from summer, some from just days earlier. But what really disturbed me were the photos from the middle of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., images of people sleeping in their tents, illuminated by the camera's infrared flash, completely unaware they were being photographed. One series showed a woman camping alone, tracked throughout her entire evening, setting up her tent at dusk, cooking dinner, climbing into her sleeping bag, then hours of images of her tent with the timestamp showing she'd been monitored all night. I felt sick. This wasn't wildlife monitoring. This was surveillance. Someone was using this camera to watch people, to track them, to document them without their knowledge or consent in a place where they thought they were alone. I should have taken the camera straight to the authorities, but I needed to know if there were more. I spent the next 4 hours searching the area in a 2-mile radius around where I'd found the first camera, checking every trail junction, every campsite, every parking area. I found 6 more cameras, all positioned the same way, all pointed at trails or camping areas, all containing hundreds of photos of unsuspecting hikers and campers. One camera near the Mill Creek Road parking area had images of people loading and unloading gear from their vehicles, clear shots of license plates, vehicle makes, and models. Another camera overlooked a popular primitive campsite and had photos of at least 20 different groups who'd stayed there over the summer. The last camera I found was near a stream crossing, and beneath it, buried in a waterproof case under some leaves, I found a notebook. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside were handwritten notes, dozens of pages of them, organized by date and location. License plate numbers, vehicle descriptions, physical descriptions of people, notes about whether they were hiking alone or in groups, where they'd set up camp, what time they'd arrived and left. One entry from August read, female, mid-20s, blonde hair, solo hiker, blue Honda Civic, plates ending in 4039, camped at Mill Creek Site number 3, stayed 2 nights, left tent unzipped when she went to get water. Another from September, male, early 30s, camping with girlfriend, red Ford truck, set up on east side of trail mile marker 7, left camp unattended for 3 hours afternoon of 9:15. There were entries for over 50 different people, some with multiple sightings tracked over weeks or months, some marked with stars or underlined, like they were priorities. Near the back of the notebook were blank pages with headers that just said targets, and beneath it, a list of physical descriptions and license plate numbers. I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't just someone's weird hobby. This was someone hunting people, using the remote wilderness as their stalking ground, compiling information on victims, tracking their patterns, learning when they were most vulnerable. And it had been going on for at least 6 months, maybe longer. I gathered all 7 cameras and the notebook, loaded them into my backpack, and hiked back to my truck as fast as I could. I didn't care about my camping gear anymore. I didn't care about the elk photos. I just wanted to get this evidence to someone who could do something about it. The nearest state police barracks was in LaPorte, about 20 miles from Hillsgrove. I drove there directly, walked in still wearing my hiking clothes, and told the trooper at the desk I needed to report something urgent. They took me to an interview room, and I laid out everything, the cameras, the SD cards, the notebook. The trooper who took my statement was young, maybe late, 20s, and as I explained what I'd found, I could see his expression change from skepticism to genuine concern. He called in a senior investigator, and I spent the next 2 hours going over every detail, marking locations on a map, explaining the photo timestamps, walking them through the notebook entries. They were taking it seriously, talking about potential stalking cases, possible connections to missing persons reports in the area, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. It was a photo of me, sitting in the interview room at the police station, taken from outside through the window. The angle suggested it had been shot from across the street, maybe from a parked car. The timestamp said it had been taken 30 seconds ago. Below the photo, a message. "You shouldn't have touched my cameras. I know where you park your truck." Can someone track you through the wilderness, document your every move, and still remain completely invisible? I showed the text to the investigators immediately. They ran outside to check the street but found nothing. No suspicious vehicles, no one hanging around. They pulled security footage from the municipal building across the street and saw a figure in a hoodie taking a photo with a phone before walking away. But the footage wasn't clear enough to identify them. The investigator told me to go home, that they'd handle it from here, but I didn't feel safe. Whoever had set up those cameras knew who I was now, knew my truck, probably had photos of me from when I'd been searching for the cameras. I'd walked right past them, been photographed without knowing, just like all those other people. I stayed in a hotel that night in Williamsport, didn't go back to Hillsgrove, didn't go back to my apartment. The next morning, the state police called me. They'd identified the owner of the notebook through handwriting analysis and cross-referencing some of the information. It was a man from Eagles Mere, about 30 miles from Hillsgrove, who had prior arrests for stalking and harassment from 5 years earlier. They'd gone to his house with a warrant and found more notebooks, more cameras, hard drives full of photos and videos. He'd been systematically surveilling hikers and campers in the Loyalsock State Forest for over 2 years, compiling what the investigator called target packages on women who hiked alone, couples who camped in remote areas, anyone he deemed vulnerable. The most disturbing part was what they found on his computer. He'd been cross-referencing the license plates from his surveillance with DMV records, finding home addresses, social media profiles, building complete dossiers on people who'd just been trying to enjoy a weekend camping trip. Several women on his list had reported feeling watched while hiking or had experienced break-ins at their campsites, but they'd attributed it to paranoia or random chance. 2 of the women he'd been tracking had reported seeing someone watching them from the woods while they camped alone, but assumed it was just another camper or a hunter. They'd felt crazy for being scared, thought they were overreacting, but they weren't. He'd been there, watching them, photographing them, learning their patterns. The man was arrested and charged with multiple counts of stalking, harassment, and invasion of privacy. The trial is still ongoing, but the prosecutor told me they're confident they can make the charges stick. They contacted everyone they could identify from the photos and notebooks, warned them about what had been happening. Dozens of people who had no idea they'd been targets. I still go camping. I still photograph wildlife, but I'm never alone anymore. I bring friends. I vary my locations. I'm constantly aware of my surroundings in a way I never was before. And every time I see a trail camera in the woods, I check it. I examine where it's pointed, what it's monitoring, because I know now that not everyone who uses the forest does so with good intentions. I've destroyed probably 20 trail cameras since October, taken them down, smashed them, thrown them in ravines. Some were probably legitimate hunting cameras, and if so, I'm sorry. But I can't take that chance anymore. The forest should be a place where people can escape surveillance, where you can exist without being watched, documented, tracked. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep it that way. The thing that haunts me most isn't even what I found. It's what I didn't find. Those 7 cameras were clustered in one small area of a 114,000-acre forest. The man who placed them had been doing this for 2 years, and I found his operation by pure chance. How many other people are doing the same thing? How many other cameras are out there, hidden in the trees, watching trails, monitoring campsites, turning wilderness into hunting grounds? I reported my findings to the Pennsylvania Game Commission and the DCNR Bureau of Forestry. They've increased patrols in the Loyalsock State Forest and put up signs warning hikers to report suspicious trail cameras, but it's impossible to monitor every square mile of state forest land. The wilderness is vast, and the people who want to exploit that vastness will always find ways to do it. Last month, I was hiking in a different state forest, over in Center County, and I found another trail camera pointed at a camping area. My hands were shaking as I checked the SD card, expecting to find more surveillance photos, but it was empty, brand new, just placed. I smashed it anyway, left the pieces scattered on the ground as a message to whoever put it there. Maybe I'm paranoid now. Maybe I'm seeing threats where none exist, but I'd rather be paranoid than naive. I'd rather destroy 100 legitimate hunting cameras than leave even one surveillance camera operational, because I know what happens when people think they're alone in the wilderness, but they're not. I've seen the photos. I've read the notebooks. I've talked to the women who were targeted. The forest used to be my sanctuary, the place where I felt most free, most myself. Now it's a place where I'm constantly vigilant, constantly watching for the watchers, And I hate that something that should be beautiful and pure has been corrupted by the knowledge that someone might always be watching, waiting, documenting, hunting. But I keep going back, because giving up would mean letting them win, letting the predators claim the wilderness as their territory while the rest of us hide in cities and suburbs. The forest belongs to everyone, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure it stays that way, even if it means checking every camera, questioning every shadow, destroying every device that turns nature into a surveillance network. Because the wilderness should be the one place where you can truly disappear, where no one is watching, where you're free, and I'll fight to keep it that way, one camera at a time. My name is Elsa, and I need to tell you about the night I picked up a passenger who wasn't supposed to exist, about the split-second decision that saved her life, and about the 3 other women who weren't as lucky. What happened on that frozen January night in 2025 taught me that monsters don't just hide in dark alleys. They hide on rural Pennsylvania backroads where no one can hear you scream. And sometimes the only thing standing between life and death is a stranger who decides to trust their gut. I drive for a rideshare app on weekends to make extra money. I'm a teacher during the week, but the pay isn't great, and I've got student loans to cover. Most of my rides are routine. People going to bars in Lebanon, college kids heading home from parties, airport runs to Harrisburg. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous, just easy money while I listen to podcasts and drive familiar roads. January 12th, 2025 was different. We just had a massive snowstorm roll through Lebanon County, one of those brutal winter systems that dumps a foot of snow and drops temperatures into the single digits. Most people were staying home, the roads were barely plowed, and I was about to call it a night when I got a ping for a pickup at the Sunoco station outside Milbach at 1:30 a.m. Milbach is barely a town, just a few buildings clustered along Route 501 in rural Lebanon County, surrounded by farmland and woods. The pickup location was at a gas station that's usually closed by midnight, and I almost declined the ride. It was late, the roads were terrible, and something about it felt off. But the fare was decent, and I was only about 10 minutes away, so I accepted. When I pulled into the gas station, the place was dark, closed like I'd expected, but there was a figure standing under the overhang by the pumps, lit by the dim security lights. As I got closer, I realized it was a woman, and something was very wrong. She was maybe in her 30s, wearing jeans and a thin sweatshirt, no coat, and she was soaking wet like she'd been walking through the snow for hours. But what made my stomach drop was her feet. She was barefoot, standing in the snow in below freezing temperatures with no shoes. Her hair was plastered to her face, and she was shaking so hard I could see it from inside my car. I unlocked the doors, and she climbed into the back seat without saying a word, just stared straight ahead with this blank expression. I turned around to check on her, and that's when I saw her wrists. They were red and raw, like she'd been restrained with something tight, rope or zip ties maybe. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaky. She didn't answer, just gave me an address, her voice barely a whisper. It was a rural route number, somewhere out in the farmland between Milbach and Richland. I should have asked more questions, should have insisted on taking her to a hospital or calling someone, but I was scared and confused, and I just started driving. She wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't answer when I asked if she was hurt, just stared out the window at the dark snow-covered fields sliding past. The address she'd given me took us deeper into the countryside, away from Route 501 onto narrow back roads that hadn't been plowed yet. My car struggled through the snow, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at her, trying to figure out what was happening. She was crying silently, tears running down her face, but she wasn't making a sound. After about 15 minutes, my GPS indicated we'd arrived. The address was a farmhouse set back from the road, surrounded by empty fields and bare trees. The house was dark, no lights on, no cars in the driveway, no signs of life. It looked abandoned, one of those old Pennsylvania farmsteads that got left behind when families moved away or farms got consolidated. The driveway hadn't been plowed, there were no tire tracks, Nothing to suggest anyone lived there. I pulled up to the edge of the driveway and turned to my passenger. "This is the address you gave me." She looked at the house, and her whole body went rigid. "This isn't right," she said, her voice shaking. "This isn't. I don't know where I am." That's when she started really crying. Not silent tears anymore, but full sobbing, gasping for breath. "I don't know where I am," she kept repeating. "I don't know how I got to that gas station. I don't remember. Please don't leave me here." My heart was pounding. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was very, very wrong. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Where do you live? Where were you trying to go?" She couldn't answer. She just kept crying and shaking, and then she grabbed my seat and pulled herself forward. "Please don't leave me here," she begged. "He'll find me again, please. I don't know where I am, but I can't be here. He'll come back." That's when I saw the bruises clearly, not just on her wrists, but on her arms, her neck, dark purple marks that looked fresh. This woman hadn't been in an accident. She hadn't gotten lost in the storm. Someone had done this to her. I pulled out my phone and called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I told the dispatcher where we were, that I had a passenger who seemed to be in distress, who had injuries, and was terrified and confused. The dispatcher said they'd send a unit, but it might take 15 or 20 minutes because of the road conditions. While we waited, I tried to keep her calm, asked her questions, tried to piece together what had happened. She said her name was something, I won't repeat it here because the police asked me not to, but she didn't know what day it was, didn't know how long she'd been gone. The last thing she remembered clearly was driving home from work, and then nothing, just fragments of darkness and cold and pain. "He'll find me," she kept saying. "He always finds me. I tried to leave before, but he caught me. Please, you have to believe me. If he comes back, if he finds me here." When is isolation a weapon instead of just geography? We'd been waiting maybe 10 minutes when I saw headlights in my rearview mirror, a truck coming down the back road toward us, moving slowly through the snow. My passenger saw it too, and she went completely silent. All the color drained from her face. "It's him," she whispered. "It's him, please. Please drive away, please." But I hesitated. I didn't know what was happening. Maybe it was the police, maybe it was someone who lived nearby. I didn't want to make things worse by running. The truck pulled up behind my car, blocking me in, and a man got out. He was maybe 40, wearing a heavy coat and work boots, and he walked up to my window with this expression that looked friendly, concerned, like he was a neighbor checking on us. I cracked my window an inch. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice casual. Then he looked past me into the back seat, and his expression changed. Recognition and something else. Something that made my blood run cold. "There you are, honey," he said to my passenger, his voice soft, affectionate, the kind of tone you'd use with someone you loved. "I've been looking for you. You had me so worried." My passenger had gone completely still, frozen in the back seat like a rabbit caught by a predator. She wasn't crying anymore, wasn't moving, barely breathing. The man smiled at me. "Thank you so much for finding my wife," he said. "She has these episodes sometimes, wanders off, gets confused. I've been driving around for hours trying to find her. I can't tell you how relieved I am." Everything about the situation felt wrong. The way he was smiling, the way my passenger had stopped moving completely, the way he was already reaching for the back door handle. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her face, and she was staring at me with absolute terror in her eyes, and then she mouthed 2 words, "Help me." That's all it took, 2 words that she couldn't say out loud, couldn't risk him hearing, and I knew that if I let him take her, she was dead. I made a decision in about 2 seconds. I locked all the doors, put my car in reverse, and hit the gas. My tires spun in the snow, but I backed up hard enough to bump his truck, creating just enough space to maneuver around him. He was yelling something, reaching for my door handle, but I'd already shifted into drive and was pulling away, fishtailing through the snow, back toward the main road. I was on the phone with 911 again, screaming that someone was trying to take my passenger, giving them the description of the truck, the license plate number I'd managed to catch in my headlights. The dispatcher told me to drive to the nearest police station, that units were being dispatched to intercept the truck. My passenger was sobbing again in the back seat, but this time it sounded different, like relief mixed with terror. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you, thank you. He would have killed me. He was going to kill me." I drove straight to the Lebanon City police station, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, checking my mirror constantly to make sure the truck wasn't following us. When we pulled up to the station, there were already officers outside waiting for us. What happened next took hours. My passenger was taken to the hospital. I gave a statement that felt like it lasted forever, and state police went to find the man with the truck. They got him about 3 miles from where we'd been, trying to get back to a property he owned, an old farmhouse similar to the abandoned one we'd stopped at, 6 miles outside Milbach on a rural road that probably didn't see traffic more than once a day. What they found at that farmhouse made me sick. It was set up like a prison. Reinforced locks on the doors, windows boarded from the outside, a basement with chains bolted to the wall. My passenger had been held there for 6 days. She'd escaped that night by breaking a basement window and running through the storm in the clothes she was wearing. No shoes, no coat, just desperate to get away. She'd walked almost 4 miles through the snow to that gas station. She didn't know where she was or how to get help. She just knew she had to run. The detective who interviewed me told me that they'd found evidence of at least 3 other women who'd been held at that property over the past 2 years. Personal belongings, identification, photos. They were able to identify 2 of the women. Both had been reported missing from other counties. Both cases had gone cold. They never found the 3rd woman, never identified her, which means she's still out there somewhere. Or she's not out there at all. The man, I won't give him the dignity of using his name, was arrested and charged with kidnapping, assault, unlawful imprisonment, and they're still building the case for the other women. The trial is scheduled for later this year, and I'll have to testify. I'll have to sit in a courtroom and describe that night. And I'm terrified, but I'll do it because that woman is alive because I trusted my gut. The detective told me later that if I'd let him take her, she wouldn't have survived the night. He'd already decided she was too much of a risk after escaping once. He would have killed her and buried her on that property with the others. The fact that a rideshare driver happened to pick her up, happened to be a woman who noticed something was wrong, happened to believe her when she asked for help, all of that was pure chance. And chance is a terrible thing to rely on when your life is in danger. I still drive for the rideshare app. I still need the money, but I've changed my rules. I don't accept pickups from rural gas stations after midnight. I don't take rides to addresses that look abandoned or isolated. And if something feels wrong, I trust that feeling. I cancel the ride. I call the police. I do whatever it takes to stay safe. But I think about the other women, the ones who weren't lucky enough to have someone pick them up, or someone believe them, or someone make that split-second decision to drive away instead of letting the nice man take his wife home. I think about how many women disappear on rural backroads where isolation isn't just geography. It's a weapon, where cell service is spotty, and the nearest house might be miles away, and screaming doesn't matter because no one will hear you. Pennsylvania is beautiful, the farmland and the mountains and the small towns. But there are dark spaces between those towns, empty properties where someone can do terrible things and nobody notices. Roads where you can drive for 20 minutes without seeing another car. Places where you can hold someone prisoner, and their screams are just wind through the trees. The woman I picked up that night, she's safe now. She's recovering. She's got family helping her rebuild her life. She called me once to thank me, and she told me that the 6 days she was held in that farmhouse felt like 6 years, that she'd given up hope of ever getting out, that running into the storm barefoot had been a last desperate act, and finding that gas station had been a miracle. I told her I was glad I was there, glad I listened when she asked for help, And she said something that I think about every time I get a ping for a ride in a rural area. She said, "You were the first person who believed me, the first person who saw that I was in danger and didn't just take his word that everything was fine, and that's the only reason I'm alive." Sometimes survival comes down to whether a stranger decides to trust their instincts or trust what they're being told. And I'm grateful I chose the right one, but I know not everyone does. And that's the horror that keeps me awake at night. My name is Eddie, and I need to tell you about what I found at the bottom of the Yoyogini River in the summer of 2024, about the thing that was waiting in the darkness beneath the rapids, and about the question that keeps me awake at night: what if it's still out there, just in a different river, watching different tourists waiting for the next person to pull under? What happened in Ohiopyle that July changed everything. I thought I knew about the river I'd been diving for 10 years. I'm an EMT based in Fayette County, Pennsylvania, and I've been a volunteer rescue diver with Ohiopyle Fire Department since 2014. Ohiopyle is tiny, population maybe 59 people, but in the summer it explodes with tourists who come for the whitewater rafting and kayaking on the Youghiogini River. We call it the Yuh for short. The Lower Yough is one of the most popular whitewater rivers in the eastern United States. Thousands of people float it every summer, and most of them have no idea how dangerous it can be. I've recovered bodies from the Yuh before. It's the worst part of the job, but somebody has to do it. The river has claimed at least 19 lives over the years, most at a rapid called Dimple Rock, an undercut formation that can trap swimmers beneath the surface. Every death is tragic, but they're usually explainable. Someone flips their raft, gets caught in the hydraulic, can't get free, drowns before anyone can reach them. It's terrible, but it makes sense. The river is powerful and unpredictable, and sometimes people make mistakes. July 15th, 2024 was different. It was a Monday afternoon during peak tourist season. The river was packed with commercial rafting groups and private kayakers. I got the call around 3 p.m., kayaker down near the swimmer's rapid section. Witnesses said he'd capsized and never surfaced. By the time I arrived with my dive gear, River Rescue had been searching for almost 40 minutes with no success. The water was murky from recent rain, visibility maybe 3 or 4 feet underwater, even with my dive light. I went down in the area where witnesses had last seen the kayaker, working in a grid pattern, feeling along the rocky bottom. It took me about 20 minutes to locate him. He was wedged between 2 large rocks about 20 feet down, his kayak nearby, still partially inflated. What struck me immediately was his position. He wasn't trapped by rocks or tangled in his equipment. He was just there, suspended between the rocks, like he'd been placed carefully. But that didn't make sense. Drowning victims don't position themselves. They fight and struggle and end up wherever the current takes them. I was securing the recovery line when I noticed his helmet. He was wearing a GoPro camera mounted to it, still strapped on, and the little red recording light was blinking. The camera was still on, still recording, after being underwater for over an hour. I brought him up, and we transferred him to the coroner, performed all the standard procedures, filed the incident report. Accidental drowning, they said, happens every summer on the Yo. Tragic, but not suspicious. But I couldn't stop thinking about that GoPro, about what it might have recorded. I reached out to the victim's family through official channels, asked if I could review the footage as part of understanding what happened, maybe learn something that could prevent future accidents. They agreed, and 3 days later, I was sitting in my living room, watching the last moments of a man's life. The footage started normal, him paddling through the rapids, whooping with excitement, the camera catching spray and sunlight, and the green blur of trees along the riverbank. Then he hit Swimmer's Rapid, a Class 3 that most kayakers handle without issue, and his boat flipped. Standard stuff, happens all the time. You roll back up or wet exit and swim to shore. But he didn't roll back up, and what happened next made my blood run cold. The The footage went underwater, dark and turbulent, and you could see him trying to exit his kayak, pulling the spray skirt, kicking free. Then the camera angle shifted as he started swimming toward the surface, and that's when I saw it. Something was moving below him, a dark shape rising from deeper water, and then suddenly he was being pulled down. Not by current, not by equipment, but by something that had grabbed him and was dragging him toward the bottom. The footage became chaotic, spinning and bubbling, but there were flashes of what looked like arms, human arms, in some kind of wetsuit or dive suit, wrapped around the victim's legs, pulling him deeper. He fought. You could see his hands reaching up toward the fading light above, but whatever had him was stronger, pulling him down into the darker water near the rocky bottom. The last clear image before the camera angle wedged against a rock was a figure, humanoid, but moving wrong, swimming away into the murky distance with powerful practice strokes. Then just rocks and darkness, and the red recording light blinking for the next hour until I found him. I watched that footage 5 times, trying to convince myself I was seeing it wrong, that it was just debris or shadows or current playing tricks with the underwater visibility. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. Someone had pulled that kayaker under. Someone had drowned him deliberately and then left him wedged between rocks like a spider storing prey. I took the footage to the state police, showed them what I'd found, insisted they watch it carefully. They did, and they agreed it looked suspicious. But the underwater footage was too dark, too unclear to identify anyone or even confirm definitively that it was a person and not just current and debris. The coroner's ruling stood. Accidental drowning. Case closed. But I couldn't let it go. I'd been diving the Yuff for 10 years. I knew every rock formation, every hydraulic, every danger spot, and I'd never seen or heard of anyone diving that section of river except for rescues. Who would be down there? Why would they be down there? And how long had they been there? I started asking questions, talking to other river guides, commercial rafting companies, locals who'd been working the river for decades. Most of them dismissed me, thought I was seeing patterns where none existed, but a few, the older guides who'd been around since the 80s, they got quiet when I brought it up. One guide, a man who'd been running the lower Yos since 1982, finally told me something useful. He said over the past 3 years, there'd been at least 4 disappearances in that same section of river. Swimmers, who'd gone under and were never found, bodies never recovered. All of them were tourists, all during peak summer season, all ruled as probable drownings with remains assumed to be washed downstream. 4 people in 3 years, in the same half-mile stretch of river, and nobody had connected them because the Yo has accidents every season. It's expected. It's tragic, but normal. Except now I knew it might not be normal at all. I went back to that section with my dive gear. Not as a rescue diver, but as an investigator. I wanted to see what was down there, what I might have missed. I dove during a weekday when river traffic was lighter, working methodically through the area where I'd found the kayaker. 20 feet down, near the edge of a deep channel, I found something that shouldn't exist. Rope anchors, stainless steel bolts drilled into the rock face, with lengths of climbing rope tied off, creating holds and anchor points along the underwater cliff. Someone had set up a system down there, a way to position themselves, to hold steady against the current, to wait. What lives beneath the surface of places we think are safe? But that wasn't the worst discovery. Following the rope system led me to an area I'd never explored before, a section where the rocks created an overhang, almost like a small underwater cave. And tucked into that space, hidden from surface view, was a collection of equipment, GoPro cameras wedged into rock crevices, all pointed up toward the surface, where rafters and kayakers would pass overhead, all with their recording lights blinking. There were 7 cameras total, all recent models, all recording. I checked the SD cards right there underwater, and they were full of footage, hours and hours of underwater shots of people floating past, swimming, struggling in the current, completely unaware they were being filmed from below. And then, as I was checking the last camera, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. A figure in a wetsuit, maybe 30 feet away, tucked into the rocks, completely motionless, watching me. We made eye contact through our masks, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then the figure pushed off from the rocks and swam deeper, away from me, toward a section of the riverbed I'd thought was solid rock. But it wasn't solid. There was an opening, a cave entrance, maybe 3 feet wide, hidden by the angle and the murky water, and the figure disappeared into it like smoke. I didn't follow. Every instinct I had screamed at me to surface, to get out of the water, to call for help. I grabbed the cameras I could reach and ascended as fast as safely possible, breaking the surface and swimming to shore like something was chasing me. The state police took me seriously this time. They sent a full dive team with underwater lights and sonar equipment. They found the cave system, a network of submerged passages that extended back into the limestone cliff face, some of them large enough for a person to move through. And deep in those caves, they found evidence of habitation, dry areas above the water line where someone had created a space, waterproof containers with supplies, more cameras, more rope equipment, even a wetsuit hanging from a rock projection to dry. They found personal items too, belongings from the river, GoPros like the one the kayaker had been wearing, phones in waterproof cases, a woman's prescription sunglasses, a man's watch. Items from victims maybe, or just things collected from the river bottom over time. There was no way to know, but they never found who was living down there. The cave system had multiple exits, some of them surfacing in hidden spots along the riverbank miles downstream. Whoever had been there was gone, vanished, and despite searches and surveillance and alerts to every river authority in the region, they never found a suspect. The incident stopped. No more mysterious drownings in that section. No more unexplained disappearances. The tourism officials in Ohiopyle were relieved. They kept the whole thing quiet, didn't want to scare away the summer crowds that the tiny town depends on for survival. The official story is that the kayaker's death was accidental, that the cave system is a natural formation with no evidence of foul play, that there's nothing to worry about. But I know what I saw. I know what was on those cameras. I know that someone was living beneath the yuv, waiting in the darkness, watching tourists float overhead, and occasionally pulling them under. I don't know why. I don't know if it was for some sick thrill, or if there was some other motive I can't understand, but it happened, and the person who did it is still out there somewhere. I don't dive the yuff anymore. I can't. Every time I go underwater, I imagine what it would be like to be a swimmer on the surface, happy and excited, and completely unaware that something is watching from below, waiting for the right moment to reach up and drag you down into darkness. Other river guides have reached out to me since from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, North Carolina, places with popular whitewater tourism. A few of them have mentioned similar things, disappearances that don't quite add up, sections of river where swimmers vanish more often than statistics would suggest, underwater cave systems that seem to have been modified or equipped by someone. One guide in West Virginia told me he'd found rope anchors bolted to rocks in the New River Gorge, similar to what I'd discovered in the Yuff. Another in North Carolina said he'd recovered a drowning victim who had marks on his ankles, like he'd been grabbed and held underwater. Maybe they're all coincidences. Maybe I'm seeing patterns that don't exist, connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. But sometimes I wonder if whoever was in the Yuff just moved to a different river, set up in a different cave system, started watching a different group of tourists who have no idea that the river they're playing in has something living beneath it, something that treats whitewater tourism like a hunting ground. I reported everything to the authorities, gave them all the evidence, all the footage, all my theories. They thanked me and told me they'd investigate, but I know the truth. They can't patrol every river, can't search every cave system, can't warn every tourist that maybe, just maybe, there's something watching from below. So the river keeps flowing. The tourists keep coming. The rafting companies keep running trips. And somewhere beneath the surface of America's whitewater rivers, there might be someone waiting in the darkness, watching, collecting equipment from victims, and occasionally reaching up to pull another swimmer down into the depths where no one can hear them scream. I think about that every time I see vacation photos of families rafting, every time I hear about another accidental drowning on a popular river, every time someone tells me I'm paranoid for warning people about underwater dangers that authorities say don't exist. Maybe I am paranoid, or maybe I'm the only one who knows the truth, that the places we go to feel free and alive and connected to nature might also be the places where predators hide, where the isolation we seek becomes the weapon they use against us. The Yuff still runs through Ohiopyle, still brings thousands of tourists every summer, and the caves beneath it still exist, empty now according to authorities, safe now according to officials. But I'll never believe that, because I saw what was down there. I looked into its eyes through my dive mask, and I know it didn't die or disappear, it just moved. And somewhere else, on some other river, it's waiting again. My name is Emmeline, and I still hear that monotone voice, the one that doesn't stop, that never changes, repeating coordinates that lead to places where people vanished without a trace. Working as a cell tower technician in rural Pennsylvania, climbing towers where most wouldn't dare, I never expected to uncover a nightmare woven into the communication lines themselves, a web of signals carrying secrets darker than any isolated forest could hide. In September 2024, near the tiny town of Staruka, population barely 200, I was sent to perform routine maintenance on a remote cell tower deep in the woods. That morning, the air was crisp, the forest heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine, and the only sounds were the steady hum of the equipment and the whistle of the wind through the trees. The tower stood tall against the morning sky, a lone sentinel in the backwoods, its blinking lights faint against the shadows. I started my standard checks, climbing carefully with my harness and tools. Everything looked normal until I accessed the equipment housing. There, hidden beneath a metal panel, was a small radio transmitter I had never seen before. It was old, worn, but still powered, broadcasting a looping message in a monotone voice that gave GPS coordinates and cold mechanical instructions. My heart skipped as I listened. These coordinates were real, leading to somewhere nearby, a remote clearing in the forest that my GPS recognized, just a few miles from the tower. What was this? A secret beacon? Smuggling signals? Or something worse? I copied down the coordinates, stopped my normal work, and decided to investigate. The clearing appeared after a rough hike through thick underbrush and fallen leaves, the scent of pine thick in the humid air. When I reached it, I found a plastic container buried under a pile of stones, weathered but waterproof, and inside was a journal. Its pages were yellowed but meticulously kept, filled with a chilling record they called the harvest schedule. Dates, times, and locations scattered across 4 counties, each entry paired with grisly notes that coincided perfectly with unsolved disappearances of hikers and hitchhikers over the past 6 years. The most recent entry was the most disturbing, dated only a week away, with GPS coordinates leading to a trailhead in a forest I knew well, a place many locals and tourists pass through without thought. These weren't just coincidences. Someone was hunting, organizing his kills with military precision, using the cell towers to coordinate and communicate silently across vast areas where no one would hear them. I reported what I'd found to the local police immediately, bringing the journal and the transmitter, hoping they would act fast. But my discovery seemed to stir something I hadn't expected. Before the police could send anyone to the new coordinates, my phone buzzed late that night, the same monotone voice playing through a low-quality recording, but this time it was different. It repeated my own home address, spoken slowly, clearly, hauntingly. The next day, I returned to the tower to find my safety harnesses had been tampered with, wires cut, my work equipment scattered in disarray. I realized someone didn't want this uncovered. Someone very close was watching me, stalking me, and now I was part of their twisted game. The very communication network I was helping maintain had been turned against me, used as a vehicle for terror and control. The FBI stepped in soon after, tracing the transmitter's signal to a network used by two men operating across state lines. Their victims were targeted in the most remote, isolated rural areas where no one would notice their disappearance until it was too late. The network was chilling in its efficiency, a testament to the dark side of modern technology in places forgotten by fast-paced city life. They caught one man hiding in West Virginia, but the other vanished, ghosting through the Appalachian backcountry like a phantom. My workload shifted immediately. I was transferred to urban towers, away from the remote forests and eerie signals. Every day since, I carry a gun, a bitter reminder that the quiet life I sought among the trees was never mine to have. The question that haunts me isn't just who those men were or why they did it, but how many others may be out there, using the very infrastructure designed to connect us, to isolate and strike fear into the hearts of those who wander too far into the rural unknown. Sometimes, when I drive past those towers or hear the faint buzz of a radio transmitter firing messages into the night, I wonder, are the past victims truly gone? Or is their tale repeated endlessly in the signals that pulse silently across the dark woods of Pennsylvania? Because in places where the human voice is lost to silence, technology becomes the conduit for evil. My name is Isel, and I'm an urban explorer who films abandoned places for YouTube. The town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, with a population barely in the double digits, is not like any other ghost town you've heard about. It's infamous, consumed by a mine fire that has been burning underground since 1962. And it's a place where death and decay aren't just history. They're still very much alive. I first came here in early November 2024, a foggy and cold day, the kind where the mist seems to cling to your skin and every breath tastes like smoke. Centralia looks like it's been swallowed by the earth. Empty streets cracked with smoke vents, roads that end abruptly where sinkholes have swallowed them whole, and a silence so thick it's unsettling. But what caught my attention wasn't the fire itself. It was the secrets the town still holds beneath all the ash and ruin. I was filming one of the last standing houses on Main Street, its wooden walls weathered gray, when I noticed the floorboards squeaking strangely under my boots. Something didn't feel right. Moving carefully, I pried one loose, revealing a shallow cavity beneath. There, tucked and covered in dust but still powered, was a laptop, recently charged and humming faintly like a heartbeat. Curiosity mixed with dread. Who would leave a working laptop in this ghost town? And why? I powered it on, and the screen came alive with videos. Footage dated just within the last 3 months, clear as day. People in white hazmat suits moving in and out of the abandoned mine shafts at night, dragging heavy, bulky bundles wrapped in tarps. The videos showed chilling moments from inside the shafts. A cleared room with a concrete floor, chains bolted to the walls, ominous shadows moving in and out of sight. Each clip was worse than the last. The people filming were familiarizing themselves with a space that should have remained untouched, creating what looked like makeshift cells underground. This wasn't exploration. This was something sinister. I tried to shut the laptop off, but then came the sound, a vehicle approaching on the cracked, empty streets. Panic surged through me like electricity. I grabbed the laptop and fled, ducking behind thick plumes of smoke hissing through vents in the ground. I could hear the unmistakable rumble of a utility truck drawing nearer, headlights cutting through the fog. I ran through the abandoned streets, heart pounding, clutching the laptop like my life depended on it, because it might have. They were after me. I rounded a corner to the remains of a burned-out church and hid in the dense cloud of smoke venting through the ground. The fumes were toxic, the air thick, burning my throat, but it was better than being caught. My phone was dead, my equipment left behind, and all I could do was silently record everything on that laptop. Every shadow, every sound of the truck's tires crushing broken pavement, until the vehicle finally passed. I waited an hour, afraid to move, before sneaking to my car hidden on the edge of town. I drove straight to the Pennsylvania State Police Station and handed over the laptop. My hands shook as I recounted what I'd seen. The videos, the chase, the underground horrors still alive beneath Centralia's smoking streets. The investigation went quiet after that. Officials now vigorously patrol Centralia, restricting access, but they won't talk about what's found underground, what the video showed. Conspiracy theorists whisper about how Centralia's mine fire made it the perfect place to hide evidence, because no one wants to dig where the earth is literally burning. I posted some of the footage online before the authorities started pressing me to take it down, deleting most of my channel to avoid further threats. But the question I can't escape, the nightmare I carry with me every night, is this: what happens in a town where normal rules don't apply, where the fire burns beneath the ground and people disappear underground forever? In Centralia, the past refuses to stay buried, and the abandoned aren't always alone. My name is Hadley, and I spent a summer working as a nanny for a wealthy family that rents a lake house every July in Eagles Mere, Pennsylvania. Eagles Mere is a tiny mountain lake resort town with a population of only about 120 people, nestled in the Allegheny Mountains. Known for its pristine spring-fed lake and cool, fresh mountain air, it's the kind of place people escape to for peace. But that peace hides shadows deeper than the waters themselves. When I arrived in early July 2024, the town was buzzing with summer tourists, families pulling into their cottages, and kids running through the tree-lined streets. The family I worked for had 2 children, ages 7 and 9, sweet and lively, excited about their summer adventures around the lake and in the forest trails nearby. I thought I would be living a peaceful summer, watching the kids, managing their schedules, and enjoying the fresh air. What I didn't realize was that this summer would become a nightmare I couldn't escape. From the second day, the kids kept talking about a figure they insisted was watching them from the woods. The sad man, they called him. A shadowy figure standing between trees or lurking near the edge of the lake. I told myself it was just childhood imagination, a ghost story, or a game they played, until I found muddy footprints on the deck outside their bedroom window, 3 nights in a row. Curiosity and unease gnawed at me. I decided to set up my phone in the living room with night vision to see what was going on. For 2 nights, I got nothing but silence, but on the 3rd night, my breath caught. A man was standing in the tree line outside the house, motionless, watching for hours. The faint glow of his phone screen illuminated his face, but I couldn't make out details. I could only stare at the strange visitor lurking beyond our property line. I told the parents, but they shrugged it off politely, suggesting the kids had overactive imaginations and that I was being paranoid. They didn't order a security check or call the police. They just carried on as though nothing was wrong. Those gifts started next: the bird's nest left on the windowsill, smooth stones arranged outside the kid's door, a bracelet woven from grass. The presence became impossible to ignore. The night the sliding door was open and the kids vanished. That was when fear swallowed me whole. I woke suddenly to silence, the room colder than usual. I noticed the sliding glass door leading to the porch was open, curtains slightly billowing from the night breeze. The kids were gone, their beds empty, pajamas tossed carelessly. I ran outside, calling their names into the dark, heart hammering in my chest. Then I saw them, walking toward the woods hand in hand, their faces pale in the moonlight, eyes distant like they were sleepwalking. Between them was a shadowy figure, someone I could barely make out, but who seemed calm, even kind, guiding them gently into the darkness. I screamed, and the figure stopped, slowly releasing their hands, then vanished into the trees. The kids turned and wandered back to the house as if nothing had happened, with no memory of their disappearance. They told me only that the sad man wanted to show us where he lives. The family left Eagles Mere that very night. Later, I learned from an off-the-record police conversation that reports of a watcher in the woods near summer homes had circulated for years. Missing persons investigations had an eerie pattern, most victims being children under 10, most disappearances during summer months, and most never found. Tourism is Eagles Mere's lifeblood, and so the town has chosen quiet over confrontation. I still wonder who the sad man really was, and how many more children might still be under his watch, or worse, in his control. And I wonder, in those silent summer nights, if someone else is watching me, waiting for their moment. My name is Arden, and I'm a long-haul trucker who drives Route 45 through central Pennsylvania regularly. The stretches near Mifflinburg, a town of about 3,500 tutters nestled in the beautiful Susquehanna River Valley, seem peaceful enough, rolling farmland as far as the eye can see, quiet back roads that look like they've existed unchanged for a century. But on a cold February night in 2025, I became part of a story no one in town talks about, a story that haunts me every time I'm behind the wheel at 3 a.m. on that stretch of highway. It was around 3 a.m. when my CB radio lit up with a transmission that sounded like it came from another world, a woman's voice repeating calmly but urgently, "I'm in the trunk. Route 45 eastbound near mile marker 67. I'm in the trunk." The loop was short, lasting only about 30 seconds before cutting out, but it was enough. At that moment, I was driving right near mile marker 67. The rising hairs on my neck made me slow down and scan the road ahead. Not far away, a sedan matching the description the voice gave passed by, moving at a steady pace but looking just like any other car on a lonely highway at night. I dialed 911, my voice barely hiding the panic. "There's a woman in danger. I just got a transmission on my CB. She says she's in a trunk near mile marker 67. The dispatcher assured me they'd send someone out, but soon I saw the sedan turn sharply onto a narrow farm road, heading into darkness and snow where my truck couldn't follow. I kept calling the police and relaying my position, but I heard the doubt in their voices, the kind of doubt that gets you nowhere fast. As I waited at a nearby rest stop, my CB radio crackled again, the woman's voice, less calm this time, filled with sobs. "He's taking me to the farm. Route 45, please." And then silence. The desperation in that voice wouldn't let me rest. I couldn't leave it hanging in the air, couldn't shut down and pretend someone else would save her. So I kept driving, retracing every turn, checking every farm road leading off Route 45 under the pale morning light, my eyes scanning barns, fields, and abandoned equipment sheds. At sunrise, I found a large barn, its doors slightly ajar and a sedan parked inside, covered by a tarp so meticulously that it almost seemed like a ritual. I called the police again and waited, not letting anyone near until officers arrived. When they opened the trunk, a woman, exhausted, pale, and barely conscious, was inside. Alive, but just barely hanging on. The man who owned the property tried to flee, but was quickly apprehended. I later learned that this wasn't his first time. Evidence showed at least 3 other victims who hadn't been so lucky. Women whose disappearances had gone cold over the years. That night, and every night since, I wonder how many other cries for help on those silent radios never get picked up, lost in static and disbelief. Sometimes survival depends on a single broadcast, a single listener willing to take a chance. And I was that listener. Thank you for listening to this chilling true story from rural Pennsylvania. Remember, some voices reach us when we least expect it. Will you be listening? Subscribe to Unspoken Fears to hear more real tales that'll keep you up at night. Leave your location and time in the comments, and stay safe out there.